it's quite a powerful recognition of history.
Yeah.
A powerful respect to people.
Yeah.
And a positive acknowledgement. And I think America learned it from my tribe, my people.
Yeah.
So I'm from the Igbo tribe in Nigeria,
okay.
Igbo ethnic group. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, everyone out there. Welcome once again back to our channel. So here with me is Kendall. Kendall, please pronounce your full name.
Yes, so my name is Kendall Belopavlovic. Yeah, so Kendall Belopavlovic is my full name. My last name is Croatian, but it looks much easier to say than it actually does.
Your last name is Croatian?
Yes.
So where does Croatia come in to you? Because you're an American. So get that relationship for us.
Yeah, so in the past, I'd say about 6 years, when I became a full adult, I started to really become interested in my ancestry and where my people come from, because I knew that a lot of my family came to this area, so the Houghton, Michigan area, during the copper mining boom of the 18 and 1900s.
Yeah.
And I learned that 4 generations back, my family came from Finland for the most part, some from Croatia, so there's a little bit of mixing there, but they came from that area of Europe to settle here.
Oh, okay. So some way, somehow, you are European who migrated to America.
Yes.
Many generations away.
Yes.
And you study, or your research is focused on indigenous studies.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There's something I noticed, and here in Michigan, but I think it's across America, I'm not so sure, where public institutions make a land acknowledgement,
yeah,
declaring that this land originally belongs to this group of people.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So actually, land acknowledgement statements are a really interesting, tradition in the United States, but also they first started in Canada and Australia.
Oh,
so
okay.
They came to the United States as an institutional practice for places like academic institutions, museums, and other federal and federally funded institutions across the nation. So it's a practice that acknowledges the people who have traditionally stewarded and lived on the homelands which you're located.
That's across the whole U.S., right?
Yeah. So it's not like a practice where everybody is mandated to do it. It's something that institutions, either at the top down level or the bottom up level, will choose to adopt. For Michigan Tech's case, our land acknowledgement statement practices come from this grassroots bottom up level and have transcended to a top level approach at this point, because they've been in practice now, I think, for at least 5 years.
Do you know how Native Americans view this? Do they see this as something substantiable? I mean, regarding the, historically, Europeans migrated, conquered the natives,
yeah,
and took over the lands. And right now, efforts have been made to acknowledge this historical part of America.
Yeah.
Is land acknowledgement a part of that? And how does the native people see it? Do they see it as a win, or?
That's a really interesting question. I can't speak for all Indigenous or Native American people, but what I can say is, from my personal experience, the work of land acknowledgements are the work of settlers. So people like me, understanding from my ancestry, my people came from Finland, from a really bad situation for themselves, in fact, to try to find a better life.
Yeah,
but still are settlers.
You look Finnish.
Yes. Yes, I
do. So, no, wait, have you been to Finland?
I have not. No, I want to go. You were one country over, right?
Yeah.
So you were looking right
I was
there.
in Sweden, and first time I saw Kendall, I'm like, she's Swedish. And then we spoke, we found out that her some great grandparents is from Finland.
Yes.
some great. Did you know the person? Do you know the name of the person?
I'm blanking on the original ancestors who settled in the Trap Rock Valley area, which is north of Calumet, Michigan. I'm blanking on their names, but the third generations was George. At least I know that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the original settler's son was named George.
So, when you say you're ancestrally from Finland, is there a connection to a specific part of Finland, or that's the end of story? Finland.
So my mother's maiden name is Heikkinen, and Heikkinen is a really popular Finnish name.
Oh, okay.
So we're not entirely sure where in that region we came from, but we do have a connection to the indigenous people there, the Sami people, and as part of our DNA. And so I think that tells a story of like partially, maybe at a subconscious level, why I think doing indigenous work is so important to me is because that's just in my blood.
That's part of your story.
Yeah.
So you were born in America, you were raised American, your parents American, grandparents American, you've always been American.
Yeah.
So how do you separate your identity from that of Native Americans? I mean, after so many years.
Yeah.
You're not speaking for Native Americans, but I'm asking you as someone who studies indigenous people and someone who acknowledges these things, this part of history.
Yeah. So actually, it's just being a community member here, right? So when I was a child, I had a friend who would take me every year to the powwow over at Keona Bay Indian Community, which is 45 minutes away from Houghton, Michigan. And I didn't know what a powwow was. I didn't know who I was interacting with.
Yeah.
But it became a part of like my every summer, something that I really looked forward to because it was right around the time of my birthday. So it was a really special event for me. When I became a teenager and then a young adult who started going to college here at Michigan Tech, I went to the archives to learn a little bit more about our local history. And our local history is Indigenous history.
Yeah.
It is about the Ojibwa people who were the first copper miners here, the first farmers, the first fishers, the first land stewards, the first ecologists, like all of those things, right? And to have a public like K through 12 education that didn't tell me those things, I was really angry.
So why do you think it's not part of public education as of then?
Sure. I think there's a lot of threads that go into like what's a part of the Common Core that people are taught in K through 12.
Yeah.
I think part of it is the high school that I went to was an alternative high school, which means that it's made for people who have sort of like different life circumstances, and they're getting a diploma to graduate. So they might be young mothers or people who struggle in other like school environments, and this is a place for them to get either their diploma or their GED and then move on with life.
Yeah.
I went there because I had social problems with my previous high school, but the like Common Core education that I was receiving was like very much get your basics and get out. So there's no AP classes, there's no like additional sort of education about history or language or anything like that, and so those resources just weren't there. I think that's part of it, but I also think that our history classes, especially in the United States, teach Indigenous people and communities and histories as things of the past, as tragedies, and it doesn't really explain what's happening now. And I didn't really learn anything about that until I was an undergrad, but more so as a graduate student have I been able to have really wonderful educational experiences and opportunities.
Yeah. And now I'm wondering, what is your current research regarding Indigenous studies? I mean, tell us about your work.
Yeah. So my first, I think it's great that you asked that question about land acknowledgement statements,
Yes.
right? Because my first interaction with Indigenous studies at an institutional level, at an academic level, was through questioning what is a land acknowledgement statement.
Oh, okay.
Where does ours come from?
When I say it, you send an email, you receive an email, from a public institution, you see the land acknowledgement written. So I worked briefly for a public office, and for every design, because I was doing branding, for every design, I have to add land acknowledgement there.
Okay.
And the land acknowledgement will, some names that are not the usual names. For example, you might know this place to be Michigan, but the land acknowledgement will call this place something else.
Yeah.
So why were the name even changed in the first place?
I mean, the names changed because of settlers, because of colonialism.
They came and
so like the names become westernized, Europeanized, what have you, Americanized, all those three layers of transformations. So like with land acknowledgement statements, it's really about understanding the history, the
Yeah.
treaties that are involved with the specific land base, and who the people are who traditionally and contemporarily live on and in those lands, take care of them, and have rights and responsibilities. And so I didn't know any of those things, but I kept seeing like emails circulating with land acknowledgement statements. And I was like, I want to use one because I really care about my local community members and about this sort of visibility and allyship. But I didn't want to do it without intention or understanding.
Yeah.
And so I contacted the person who was the first one to write a land acknowledgement statement for Michigan Tech, Valerie Ganyu. And we started a working relationship where we have now been working together on various projects for like the past 2 years. So it started off as this question about land acknowledgement statements in one of my classes, and it's transformed into a series of workshops about land acknowledgement statements and practices of acknowledging that go beyond like writing a land acknowledgement statement. What do you do after you're done with that part of your research and your education and your learning? And then moving into, specifically for this campus, a lot of my work focuses on how to create more spaces for Indigenous people, Indigenous voices, especially our local community members, and how to do that respectfully, reciprocally, and responsibly. And so like I'm really looking at all those different things.
I have a different question, which as this question you might have an answer or you might not.
Okay.
But I'm wondering how the indigenous people view the fellow Americans that are not indigenous people.
Yeah.
Is it more like some settlers, some migrants who came, settled in, or is now like every day, we're all same, we're all just Americans?
Yeah, so like again, I can only speak to the experiences that I've had.
Yeah,
And I've had a couple, so living in Wisconsin, I have had some experiences there, being in community with local Indigenous nations, so the Oneida Nation, and in Shawano County, I think there's the Potawatomi and the Mohican people. And so I was more so involved with the Oneida Nation because they have a bigger presence in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I remember going into this really I wish I could remember the name, but it was like a store that had all of these beautiful Indigenous pieces of art and other things collected. So it was like a central hub, right? A place where you go to be in contact or like do workshops and just talk with other Indigenous people in the community. And I remember talking to the store manager one day, and as we were having a conversation, I got looked at in my face and told that I was a colonizer, and I had to really reckon with that.
That sounds like.
But so I've had experiences like that, and for me, respectfully, I understood where he was coming from and why he would say that,
Yeah.
and it allowed me to continue looking inward and doing the work that I do. But locally, we have our relationship. So like Michigan Tech, at large, our various departments and colleges have relationships with KVIC, so the Keweenaw Indian community, who are Ojibwa people. But I think it's really dependent upon individual relationships with the community. So like tribally, they're a nation, right? Like they have their own governance, their own ways of seeing and governing their future, their own ways of thinking about land management and like practices for water and fish and all these other things, cultural heritage and knowledge and ceremonies and all of these things. So like on the one hand, you have the United States, which is this overarching governing body, and then you have tribal nations who at a government to government level will interact with the United States. But then they also have to interact, right, with like various state level governments. And then community level. So there's a lot of different...
Okay, before we continue, before you keep telling us about your research, there's something we need to do.
Okay.
So what we need to do, if you do remember how it is stated, is to do a land acknowledgement of where we are right now. So we need to do a land acknowledgement. We're in Michigan making this video, but here is not truly... We're in Hardin, Michigan, but here is not truly... How do you make land acknowledgement without erasing? How do you balance that up?
So I make land acknowledgements when I speak at events, and I make them situationally. So I include the people in the communities and the histories that I think would be relevant to those situations.
Let's create one now. Let's see how it's done.
Okay, so like for this specific video, because we're talking as graduate students in the Peterson Library in the Walker Building on Michigan Tech's campus, like all of these things into account, maybe I would say that Michigan Tech as a university is located on the ceded territories of the traditional Chippewa, Ojibwa people's homelands by the Treaty of 1842. And that I don't have, like, in my head, I'm not able to say all of the other various tribes locally, like in this region, right? Located within the waters of Gichigami's shores. So that's Lake Superior. But thinking about that, I would want to bring that in as well.
You know, it is beautiful, actually. And the reason I think it's beautiful is because it's quite a powerful recognition of history.
Yeah.
A powerful respect to people, and a positive acknowledgement. And I think America learned it from my tribe, my people.
Yeah.
So I'm from the Igbo tribe in Nigeria, Igbo ethnic group. So we are over 40 million people in Nigeria that are Igbos.
Okay.
So the eastern part of Nigeria. And traditionally, you know, although traditions are changing with the influence of Western influence and you know, so many other influence, but traditionally, if I visit your home, or if I visit your place, or there's an occasion, we're having a party, we're having, let's say, some big party, some wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
Before any food is taken, you present the kola, or you present the meal, and someone blesses that meal. Okay. In the process of blessing the meal, you do acknowledgement.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So you start by there's a specific thing we use for cola, for like in America here, people they use cookies and sweets and chocolate. We don't use those things. Okay. We use some, I don't know if you know what's called cola nuts. Okay, it's a particular fruit. Yeah. It's a particular fruit. Yeah. So we use cola nut or another one called garden egg. Okay. Now if I'm a visitor or in a wedding or a ceremony and the host brings out the cola nuts, the garden egg or whatever they have, before I declare we could eat this, I'll have to ask, is there anyone from Hoden that's around? Okay. If someone is around, there's no one around. Okay, is there anyone from, what's the bigger city that covers Hoden?
I mean, I think Houghton is the big city.
Okay, so, then Michigan.
Yeah.
So is there anyone from Michigan around? Okay. There's no one from Michigan. Okay. Is there anyone from the, what region is this?
The Midwest.
The Midwest. Is there anyone from the Midwest? Yeah. If there's no one, we now ask, is there an American? Okay. So we have to get someone who is indigenous, closest to the land where we are. Okay. And when we get that, we now pray over the cola and then we give to the person to eat first. The person takes the cola first. The person is take before we could give to any other person. Yeah. And just thinking about it, thinking about the land acknowledgement, what it does, not just for Native Americans, is very significant. Yeah. And I think America borrowed it from Igbo.